lecture, we will be learning about the background of the Middle Ages along with the characteristics of the music. To put the time period in context, here are some of the events occurring during this time frame of 450 to 1450. Rome was sacked by Vandals in 455. The epic poem Beowulf was written around 700. The First Crusade occurred in 1066. Black Death was plaguing Europe from 1347 to 1352. Chaucer wrote the Canterbury Tales between 1387 and 1400. Joan of Arc was executed by the English in 1431. The medieval period is also often called the Middle Ages, which is a catch-all phrase to refer to the 1,000 years of history between the fall of the Roman Empire and the Age of Reawakening and Discovery, exemplified by the voyages of Christopher Columbus. The early Middle Ages was a time of migrations, upheavals, and wars. In the later Middle Ages, there was a period of cultural growth where cities began to rise and flourish. The building of Romanesque churches and monasteries, along with the later building of Gothic cathedrals, also occurred. There were very distinct classes during this time. The nobility were sheltered in fortified castles with knights in armor amusing themselves with hunting, feasting, and tournaments. The vast majority of the population were peasants that lived miserably subject to feudal overlords. The third class were the clergy of the Roman Catholic Church, and the monks held a virtual monopoly on learning in this time. The Catholic Church was the most dominant force on music. Most, if not all, educated men were a part of the clergy. The rise of monasteries contributed greatly to the shaping of the culture, and their patronage or sponsorship led to church works being saved when little else was being written down. Most of the important musicians were priests, and women were not allowed to sing in church, though they could make music in the convents. Musicians were primarily supported by the church, but courts in the cities or state began to support musicians more in the latter part of the style period. During the Middle Ages, music was primarily vocal and sacred for religious purposes. The church frowned on instruments because of their earlier use in pagan rites. Around 1000 AD, organs and bells began to be a common fixture in Catholic sacred music. Few medieval instruments have survived, and music manuscripts, like the one pictured here, did not indicate how to perform the work. The manuscript shows pitch, but not rhythm, tempo, dynamics, instrument, or voice part to use. The plain chant, or Gregorian chant, was the official music of the Roman Catholic Church for over 1,000 years because of its ability to enhance parts of the service with its monophonic melodies based on sacred Latin text. These chant melodies move step by step in a very narrow range. They have a flexible rhythm with no meter and little sense of beat because there are no notated rhythms. Originally, the chants were passed down by oral traditions, but later melodies were notated to ensure uniformity. The notation system was developed over centuries. The Gregorian chant has a sound that is often described as otherworldly because of the church modes that provided the tonal and harmonic center. The modes were basic scales made of different patterns of whole and half steps. The first surviving secular music with notation is from the 12th and 13th centuries. Secular music of this time tends to focus on topics of love or crusades along with dancing or spinning songs. Instrumental music was primarily for dancing. These secular works did have a regular meter and defined rhythm. This concludes the Middle Ages background and characteristics presentation. Please proceed to the Middle Ages music presentation.